The wind came hard across the prairie that night, a steady roar that rattled the shingles of the roof and hissed through every crack in the walls. The woman pressed her palm against the doorframe, feeling it tremble as though the house itself wanted to lift from the earth and ride the storm into the dark. Her children clung to her skirts, wide-eyed, while thunder rolled heavy over the land. It was a kind of storm that set even the strongest hearts uneasy, the kind that spoke of bad omens and worse fortunes. She had known nights like this before, yet something in the air made her feel this one would be different. She carried a lantern into barn to check the animals, though there was little worth checking anymore. 2 cows, thin from a poor season, shifted restlessly in their stalls, hooves clattering against the boards. The hay was nearly gone, the chickens half wild, and the place smelled of damp straw and old wood. She set the lantern on a hook and drew her shawl tighter. Then she heard it, a sound out of place, muffled against the rain's pounding, a dragging noise, like something heavy being pulled through mud. She froze. For a long moment she thought it might be a branch torn loose by the wind, but then it came again, closer this time. Her first instinct was to bar the door and return to her children, yet curiosity, or perhaps pity, drove her to push the barn door open wider. Lightning split the night, and for an instant the world turned white. There, just beyond the threshold, she saw a figure stumble. A man, broad-shouldered, long hair matted with rain, fell forward into the muck and did not rise. Her breath caught. Out here, strangers rarely meant anything good. But he lay there still, chest rising shallow, face turned into the earth as if the storm had wrung him dry. The children called from the doorway of the house, their small voices sharp with fear. She waved them back and knelt in the mud. The man was cold beneath her hands, soaked through, but alive. Blood mixed with rain along his shoulder, staining his torn coat. She had buried one husband already. She had no desire to bury a stranger, yet to leave him was to leave him to the wolves that sometimes prowled the edges of the land. With effort, she dragged him by the arms into the barn, the lantern's glow catching the hard planes of his face. He was younger than she expected, though weariness and scars carved him older. She laid him on a pile of straw and pressed cloth against the wound in his shoulder. The bleeding slowed, though his breathing rasped deep in his chest. He smelled of smoke and pine, of sweat and distant mountains. She told herself this was no more than a night's mercy. He would live or die, and either way he would not stay. Still, when the children crept in to see, she whispered for them to keep quiet and helped them settle blankets around his body. The storm carried on until morning. Gray light came sluggishly over the horizon, unveiling a sky washed clean yet heavy with cloud. The woman stepped outside, boots sinking into mud, and surveyed the land that stretched endless in all directions. The fields lay barren, fence lines broken where last winter's ice had snapped them. Every sight was a reminder how thin life had grown since her husband's passing, how much weight she carried alone with 2 small ones depending on her. Inside the barn, the stranger stirred. His eyes opened, pale, alert despite the fever swimming there. He struggled to sit, but winced when his wound pulled. She pressed him back gently, wary of his strength even in weakness. His voice came rough, asking only for water. She fetched it, watched as he drank slow, and noticed how the children watched it with a mixture of fear and wonder. She gave him a stern glance, but was too late. Curiosity had already rooted. Through the day, he drifted in and out of sleep. When he woke, she caught him studying the barn's rafters, the warped boards. The tools hung neatly despite their wear. His gaze returned often to the children, who played close by, pretending not to notice him. She could see questions behind his eyes, but he asked none. She preferred it that way. Questions were dangerous. The less they knew of him, the easier it would be to send him on his way once he could stand again. Yet as the hours stretched, she found herself watching him too. His hands were large, calloused from hard labor, but scarred in ways no farmer's work would explain. Across his back, glimpsed when she changed his bandage, were old marks, deep and cruel, telling of a life lived among violence. She said nothing, only pressed the cloth against his shoulder and tied it firm. He did not flinch under her touch, though his jaw tightened as if he carried pain that went deeper than wounds of flesh. Toward evening, while the children played with hay dolls in the corner, he tried to rise again. This time she let him, steadying his arm until he stood, towering in the dim barn light. For a moment the space seemed smaller with him upright, his presence filling it like a shadow. He took a few steps, legs unsteady, then reached for the stall where the cows shifted nervously. He laid a hand against one flank, murmuring low, and the animal calmed. She found herself surprised by the gentleness in his voice, so at odds with his rough exterior. At supper, she set food on the table with no invitation. He sat apart, back to the wall, as if ready to defend himself should danger enter. The children whispered questions she hushed quickly. He ate little, passing most of them, as though their hunger mattered more than his own. It unsettled her, the way he seemed to belong in the room though no bond tied him to it. When the lantern burned low, she led the children to bed, leaving him by the fire. She half expected him gone by dawn. But when morning came, he was still there, awake and splintered outside despite his wound. She called sharply for him to stop, worried he would tear the stitches she had made. Yet he only nodded once and carried the logs to the porch. His silence pressed on her nerves, but silence was better than the unknown words he might carry. She told herself again, one night, maybe two, no more. The children, however, had already taken to him. The boy followed him as he worked, eager to learn how he held the axe, how he set the logs. The girl offered him a piece of bread saved from breakfast, smiling shyly when he accepted. The woman wanted to scold them for their boldness, but the words caught in her throat. She had not seen them smile so easily in many months. That afternoon, while mending a fence, she noticed tracks in the soft earth beyond the ridge. Not hers, not her children's. Heavy boot prints, half filled with rainwater. She felt a chill though the air was warm. Later, by the well, she found a mark carved into the trunk of an old tree, a crude shape, deliberate, meant to be seen. She ran her fingers over it, heart hammering. The stranger's arrival had not been chance. He carried something with him, and others might be close. That night, she kept the lantern burning longer than usual. The barn creaked in the wind, and every sound felt too sharp, too close. When she glanced toward the stranger, she found him awake as well, eyes fixed on the darkness beyond the window. He said nothing, but the tension in his frame spoke enough. He was listening, waiting. She wondered then what enemies he bore, and whether by sheltering him she had invited danger onto her land. Still, when the children stirred in their sleep and whimpered at the howl of coyotes, it was he who rose first, crossing the room to tuck the blankets tighter around them. His movements were careful, reverent almost, as though he understood the fragile trust of children. Watching him, the woman felt her guard falter. For all the questions surrounding him, for all the unease, he had not once brought harm. Instead, he had given small kindnesses, quiet and unspoken. She stood at the doorway, arms folded against the night's chill, and tried to make sense of the path before her. She had meant to grant him shelter only for a night. Now he lingered, and with each hour her resolve to send him away weakened. The land was lonely, cruel in its silence, and perhaps she had grown too used to carrying every burden alone. Yet she could not forget the mark carved into the tree, nor the tracks leading from the ridge. His presence promised more than comfort. It promised reckoning. When dawn touched the horizon again, painting the sky in muted gold, she found him already awake, seated on the porch with the rifle across his knees. He looked toward the distance, as if expecting something to rise from it. She followed his gaze, but saw only endless prairies stretching into mist. The sight unsettled her. Whatever fate had brought him to her barn, it was not finished yet. And though part of her wanted to shut the door, bolt it, and send him on his way, another part whispered that their lives had already changed, that nothing would be the same once the path he carried reached their doorstep. She turned away, gathering her children to begin the chores of another weary day. But even as she worked, she knew the moment of choice was coming, a moment that would test the fragile peace she had built since widowhood. For the stranger was not merely passing through. His presence was a stone cast into still water, and the ripples were already reaching her shore. The days turned restless after the mark was found carved into the tree. The woman could not look at the horizon without suspicion, as though the wide land itself now carried secrets. Her children sensed it too, their laughter sharper, their play shorter, always glancing over their shoulders as though the wind carried eyes. The stranger never spoke of it, but his behavior told its own tale. He rose early, patrolled the fences, studied the land with a hunter's caution. The rifle never left his side. He was no longer the broken man she had dragged from the mud. The wound on his shoulder healed slow but steady, and with strength returning, he seemed larger, more formidable. Yet for all his imposing presence, the children grew to trust him more with each passing day. The boy followed him through the fields, eager to imitate his way of walking, his way of tying rope and sharpening tools. The girl sat near him at night, offering small bits of conversation. He answered with quiet nods or rare, soft words. In their eyes, he became a figure not of fear, but of protection. The woman, however, balanced unease and gratitude like scales that refused to settle. She remembered the tracks, the carved symbol. She remembered the way he looked into the night, as though expecting shapes to rise from the darkness. Whatever past he carried, it was walking closer every day. And though she feared it, she also feared the thought of him leaving. For in his silence, she found a strength she had not known since her husband's passing, and in his rare glances, she felt a warmth that unsettled her more than danger ever could. One afternoon, clouds gathered heavy and low, promising another storm. She worked near the well when she saw dust rising in the distance, a faint smear against the horizon. Her heart clenched. The stranger appeared at her side without sound, rifle in hand, eyes narrowed toward the ridge. His expression told her what she already knew. Riders were coming. He guided her back to the house, his hand firm at her elbow, and told her to bar the doors. It was the first direct command he had given, and she obeyed without argument. The children huddled inside while the stranger moved with quiet precision, checking ammunition, setting lanterns low, ensuring every entrance was secure. The woman felt her breath shorten, the weight of decision pressing on her. She wanted to ask who these men were, why they followed him, what he had done to draw their wrath. But the words died on her lips, for the answer mattered less than the truth before her. Danger was near, and she had already chosen his side by sheltering him. The riders did not come that night, but the next day tracks circled the ranch like wolves testing a pen. She found a second symbol carved into the fence post by the pasture, deeper and clearer than the first. Fear settled in her bones, but the stranger only tightened his grip on a rifle and told her quietly, "They mean to frighten us before they strike." She saw then a hardness in his face that spoke of long battles, of a man accustomed to being hunted. The waiting was its own torment. Each day stretched taut, filled with chores done in silence, with eyes scanning the horizon, with the children whispering questions she could not answer. At night, she heard him pacing outside the cabin, the slow crunch of boots in the dirt, the watchful presence of guardian who expected war. She wanted to tell him to leave, to draw the danger away from her family. But when she looked at her children asleep, blankets tucked by his hand, she knew she could not. His danger had become theirs, but his strength had as well. On the third night the storm broke. Lightning lit the land in stark flashes, and in one such flash she saw shapes moving at the edge of the yard. Men, their faces hidden by rain, their voices carrying curses between thunder. The barn door rattled under their hands. The horses whinnied in panic. She clutched her children to her chest, heart pounding, as the stranger stepped into the storm, rifle steady in his arms. His figure cut against the lightning like something carved from the mountain itself. Gunfire cracked, loud as the thunder. Splinters flew from the barn wall. He returned fire with grim efficiency, each shot deliberate, each motion controlled. She watched from the doorway, torn between terror and awe, as he fought with the calm of a man who had faced death too many times to fear it now. The children cried into her dress, their small hands clinging to her waist. She whispered to them, though her voice shook, promising safety she could not guarantee. The fight surged closer. One of the men broke from the shadows, charging toward the house. Without thought, the woman seized the old shotgun from above the hearth, the weight unfamiliar yet necessary. She stepped onto the porch, rain soaking her hair, and fired. The blast echoed, the man fell, and she stood trembling with smoke in her hands. The stranger glanced at her once, eyes fierce yet softened by something deeper, then turned back to the fray. The leader came last, a scarred figure who shouted the stranger's name into storm, cursing him for betrayals unspoken. Their fight was brutal, stripped of grace, fists and knives clashing in the mud, while rain poured like judgment. The woman could do nothing but watch, every strike tightening the knot in her chest. The stranger faltered once, driven to his knees, but rose again with a roar that seemed torn from the earth itself. He drove the man down, ending it with finality, and then stood swaying, blood mingling with rain. Silence followed, broken only by the hiss of rain on smoldering where lantern fire had caught the barn wall. The remaining attackers fled into the storm, their leader left behind. The woman ran to the stranger's side, her hands pressing against his wounds, her breath ragged. He looked at her then, truly looked, and in his eyes she saw not only the weight of battles past, but a plea unspoken, for a place to rest, for a reason to remain. She answered without words, guiding him inside, binding his wounds with trembling fingers. Dawn came slow, painting the sky a muted gold over a land scarred yet alive. Smoke rose from the barn, but the house stood, and so did they. The children clung to the stranger, unafraid now, their small voices calling him protector. The woman felt the same word echo in her heart, though she did not speak it. She only pressed her hand into his, and when his fingers closed around hers, it was like the sealing of a vow. Life would not be easy. The land was still harsh, the fences still broken, the memories of danger still near. But something had shifted. Where once there had been loneliness, there was now presence. Where once she bore every burden alone, she now had a partner to share them. In the quiet after the storm, as the children laughed weakly with relief, she knew the stranger's arrival had not been accident but fate. That night, when the fire burned low and the house lay in peace, the woman sat by the window, watching the land stretch silent under the moon. The stranger sat across from her, his wounds bound, his eyes steady on the horizon. For the first time, she did not feel the urge to ask when he would leave. For the first time, she hoped he never would. The narrator's voice would have ended the tale there, leaning closer to the fire as if confiding to old friends. So it was, the voice might have said, that a man half dead in the mud became the anchor for a family lost in storm. In the Wild West, fate does not knock at the door. It collapses in your barn, wounded and weary, waiting for a hand strong enough to lift it. And sometimes, friends, if you answer, it changes everything. The story ended not with promises spoken, but with silence shared, the kind that carried more weight than words. And though the prairies stretched wide and empty, the cabin no longer felt lonely. The stranger had come, and with him he had altered her fate forever.